It's an exciting time at Easterwood Airport as the airport is about to get a big upgrade. Details coming up. Plus, food insecurity is on the rise in the Brazos Valley. Tonight, we highlight those trying to fight the increase. And Congress and the Department of Justice are trying to stop the state's heartbeat bill. We have the latest on the abortion battle. Your Krhd News starts right now.
Connecting the Brazos Valley. This is Krhd News.
Thanks for joining us at 10. I'm Hallie Jones. 1 in 8 Texans battle food insecurity, according to the new study by the Department of Agriculture. KRHD's Rachel Espaillat shares how those numbers look here in the Brazos Valley and how organizations and businesses are working together to make sure people don't go hungry.
Here, we'll just get this one.
Traditional Mexican food isn't the only thing served at Casa Rodriguez in downtown Bryan. Their food comes with an extra side of kindness. Once located near Twin City Mission, the family-run restaurant was known as a place where people in need can get a free hot meal.
How's everything, guys? Y'all doing okay? The tradition has carried on, so now word on the street, I've had a few come in here saying, hey, this is where we can come get a hot meal, and I'll come on in, sit down, we got you.
A tradition Debbie Rodriguez's parents started when Casa Rodriguez first opened. Though community members are more likely to utilize other resources like the Brazos Church Pantry or the Brazos Valley Food Bank.
There's always going to be a need for charitable food assistance. There's always going to be a need for children to be fed in schools.
That need even more evident at the start of the pandemic as local food pantries saw more people using their resources.
Last year we had a big bump. It was a significant number. The numbers have dropped this year, maybe because of the child tax credit checks.
The need hasn't changed, but the pandemic may have motivated the federal government to step in and help.
It's absolutely wonderful that people are getting what they need when they need it.
Whether it's a food bank or a local restaurant serving a helping hand.
Community and good food, yes.
Everyone is better when the community works together. In Bryan, Rachel Espaillat, KRHD News.
New census data shows that the coronavirus pandemic caused poverty to go up in 2020. Last year, about 11.4% of Americans were living in poverty, up almost 1%. The median household income fell 2.9% from 2019, the highest since the record-keeping started in 1967. The Social Security Administration is expected to update its cost of living adjustment, also known as COLA, next month. The Senior Citizens League estimates that the increase will likely be around 6.6 to 6.1% and could dip as low as 5.9%. More states are seeing their obesity rates go up. That's according to the Center of Disease for Control and Prevention. The CDC says the number of states reporting at least 35% of their residents are obese has nearly doubled in the last 3 years. 16 states now report at least a 35% obesity rate for their adult residents. In 2018, it was just 9 states, and Texas was one of the states new to the list. Easterwood Airport is receiving a $6 million grant from the Federal Aviation Administration to make improvements for safety and efficiency for a general aviation ramp. The improvements are expected to begin in January, creating better space for the movement of large aircrafts. Security Director Ryan Clements says the airport typically receives grants of varying sizes on an annual basis. While this one may not be directly noticed by travelers, it plays an important role in supporting airport staff.
And the number one goal of this project is safety. Safety for the ground crew on that side of the airfield and safety for the pilots that use the airport.
The population of Brazos County has increased by 12% since 2016, according to Texas A&M University System. Clement says the future is looking bright for the airport and that Easterwood is continually in talks with major airlines. The more customers Easterwood attracts, the more a company might take interest in adding flights and planes. Back in June, the airport also received a $1.6 million grant from the FAA. Currently, only 2 airlines fly into Easterwood. American Airlines flies to Dallas-Fort Worth International, and United Airlines has flights to Bush Intercontinental in Houston. According to the Bureau of Transportation Statistics in 2019, Easterwood Field was ranked as the 242nd busiest airport in the nation with 5,200 originating passengers and 18th in the state of Texas.
There's new data from Pfizer today as they make a case for COVID booster shots. It shows that based on research from Israel and the U.S., protection wanes starting around 6 to 8 months after someone's fully vaccinated. The independent committee will decide if boosters should be made available in the U.S. immediately on Friday. The White House originally wanted them to start next week. There's more evidence the pandemic's contributed to another public health crisis. New federal data shows 16 states have adult obesity rates of 35% or higher. Those are the ones you see in red. That's up from 12 states in 2019. It was just 9 in 2018. Now, the problem exploded over the last 2 decades. In 2000, no state had an adult obesity rate over 25%. There are only a handful of areas below 25%. Those are shaded green. The nonpartisan, nonprofit group Trust for America's Health is tracking this issue.
It's about the design of our neighborhoods and ensuring that neighborhoods have walkable paths, bikeable paths, so that people have the ability to engage in physical activity or access to parks and community centers and gyms.
The group says obesity is a systemic, social, and economic issue the pandemic has made worse. Communities of color have been impacted more. 22 states had adult obesity rates at 35% or higher among Hispanic residents. For Black Americans, it's 35 states.
We see, for example, higher job loss, greater food insecurity in households of color, where Black and Latino households had greater rates of food insecurity, or children who were in virtual learning as opposed to in-person learning with less access to school meals.
The group's report points to larger policy solutions like increasing funding to the CDC's obesity prevention program. The group's president says that program currently only has enough money to support 16 states.
That we should close tax loopholes and business incentives for unhealthy food advertising, which disproportionately is directed to youth of color, in particular Black and Latino youth.
The CDC is now providing community-level data on obesity so it can be addressed on a more local level. Now, it can be tough to determine what should go in the recycling bin and what shouldn't. Next in our lineup, how one state wants to change how the recycling symbol is used. That could help with this.
New numbers are out about the number of arrests at the southern border. After the break, we find out if it went down from July's record numbers. Stay with us. The Texas abortion law is prompting a push in Congress to pass a federal reproductive rights bill when lawmakers reconvene. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the House will vote on the Women's Health Protection Act of 2021 later this month. It's expected to pass with a slight majority, but faces steep odds in the Senate. It would need 60 Senate votes to break a potential filibuster. The bill is a direct response to Texas's new law. The Department of Justice wants the courts to stop the abortion ban. The injunction says the law prevents women from exercising their constitutional rights. The filing also says the United States has the responsibility to ensure Texas cannot isolate itself from judicial review of constitutional violations. The case is likely to end up in front of the Supreme Court. Last week, the DOJ also filed a lawsuit against the state to challenge the law. A Department of Homeland Security source says U.S.-Mexico border arrests went down a bit last month from July's record numbers, but they are still high. DHS hasn't released the official data yet, but the source says there were more than 208,000 encounters in August. That includes arrests for unlawful border crossings and people turned away from U.S. ports of entry. The number was 212,000 a month earlier. July marked the highest monthly number of migrants detained at the border in 2 decades. Now let's get a check of the weather with First Alert Chief Meteorologist Matt Hines.
And we have seen a mix of clouds and sun out there today. And tonight, well, we've seen more clouds roll into the area. So we'll call it mostly cloudy. Temperature hanging out into the low 80s at 83. And the winds are out of the north-northeast at 9 miles per hour. Still the influence of Nicholas off toward the east. But it looks like that influence is slowly going down. And we do have some of those clouds rolling across the Brazos Valley, clearing back to the northeast. So it won't stay cloudy all night, but we will see clouds from time to time. And any rainfall is way over here across the southeastern part of the United States, over into parts of Alabama and Georgia, where they're seeing the heaviest of the rain. And on the backside of that, not seeing too much. But that little spin, that just sits near Lake Charles, and it's probably going to stay there. It may even move north and then retrograde back to the west. So we could see some isolated thunderstorms roll back in as we head into the weekend or shortly thereafter. So let's take a look at tomorrow, looking at partly cloudy skies across the area. Probably not going to see much on our Thursday, with the exception of those clouds. On Friday, probably not much in the way of isolated thunderstorms. I am going to put about a 20% chance in, but as you can see, the future track pretty dry out there. But farther east you are, maybe an isolated storm or two. And tonight, temperatures will fall into the upper 60s and lower 70s for us. Normal is 70, so we're right around that. And then tomorrow, highs into the upper 80s to near 90 degrees. 91's normal, so most of us slightly below normal as we head into your Thursday and Friday. Looks like highs right around 92, 91 on Saturday, 90 on Sunday, and 20% chances of isolated thunderstorms here. Don't think it'll be a washout for your weekend at all. We move into next week, and this is where we'll start concentrating on the potential of a cold front getting closer to the region. We'll go isolated thunderstorms Monday and Tuesday, scattered potential on Wednesday, with high temperatures falling from the 90s into the 80s.
Recycling bins are being filled with stuff that can't be recycled. California is on track to become the first state to restrict how the Chasing Arrows recycling symbol is used. It's a move that could have an impact across the country. California state lawmakers passed a bill banning companies from using the arrow symbol unless they can prove the material is recycled and is used to make new products. Film and flexible plastics are areas where this issue with the recycling symbol comes up.
Batteries are maybe even more problematic because they always have a little trash can with an X on it. So it says don't put it in the garbage. And the recycling arrows on a battery is meant for a take-back system, but you get a lot of confusion at the curb and people just think it should be included in the recycling stream.
Pete Keller is with Republic Services, which is one of the largest waste and recycling companies in the entire country. And he says around 22% of the items that the company receives at its facilities can't be recycled. He says it's not all packaging that has the Chasing Arrows symbol on it, but a good portion of it is. And another part is the confusion with the resin identification code.
It was designed to look like the Chasing Arrows, but it isn't technically the Chasing Arrows. So it's a triangle around a number. So that's caused a lot of confusion in the marketplace. Any plastic package has a symbol on it that looks like the recycling symbol.
Keller is hopeful that restrictions around the Chasing Arrows symbol in California will lead to packaging design changes, and those changes may extend to product packaging nationwide since they'll have to make the switch in one state. The Plastics Industry Association says it believes that labeling restrictions will confuse customers even more about what to recycle. Keller says continued public education is key to getting more people to recycle the right way. Other issues that he sees are people not being familiar with what's acceptable to recycle in their community and people putting their recycling into plastic bags. Now, California isn't the only state trying to bring more transparency around recycling. Oregon recently passed a bill to create a task force to evaluate misleading or confusing claims related to recycling. A bill pending in New York would also ban products from showing misleading claims. Now, ahead in our lineup, there have been several reports amid the pandemic of zoo animals getting sick with COVID. How veterinarians say vaccinating them can help both the animals and us. This week, the Maryland Zoo became the latest to say it will start vaccinating certain animals against COVID-19. Veterinarians tell Usher Qureshi this is part of preventing what's known as spillover infections, protecting humans and animals alike.
Scientists say most emerging infectious diseases originate in animals. In fact, the zoonotic origin of the 2003 SARS outbreak in Asia was traced back to cave-dwelling horseshoe bats in China. It eventually reached animals in live markets where it spilled over into humans.
There's a huge interconnectedness between animals and people when it comes to a different number of different viruses and other illnesses.
The source of SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 is still an official mystery. An unclassified report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence last month was only confident that it was, quote, not developed as a biological weapon. What we do know is that the novel coronavirus is not only infecting humans.
We have seen cases of COVID-19 COVID-19 occur in a number of different species around the country in different zoos, primarily primates, large cats such as tigers, lions, leopards, as well as a number of smaller carnivores like otters and mink.
Late last week, more than a dozen western lowland gorillas reportedly tested positive for COVID-19 at Zoo Atlanta. Their care team noticed changes in appetite and respiratory issues, something Dr. Mike Adkisson, Vice President of Clinical Medicine at the Chicago Zoological Society, says can be typical.
Coughing, sneezing, lethargy, the animals just clearly feel a little bit under the weather, the same way that we see those same signs and symptoms in people.
While animals are not playing a major part in the transmission of the virus, they are susceptible.
Part of the concern is that those animals are able to spread it to other animals and potentially able to spread it back to people.
The CDC says there have been isolated cases of domestic dogs and cats that have become infected and have been able to transmit COVID back to people. Zoos across the country are now vaccinating their animals, beginning with carnivores, primates, and big cats. The emergency use authorization of the vaccine Zoetis requires 2 doses 3 weeks apart.
We're still pretty early on in this process, but we know that the vaccine is safe from the trials that Zoetis has done with it. So it's really just a question of how efficacious it's going to be in the long run for our animals.
Caretakers at the Brookfield Zoo outside Chicago are required to mask and maintain social distancing as much as possible from the animals.
There have been cases that have emerged in other zoos, though, even with those guidelines in place. So we know that the virus is able to infect many of these animals the same way it's able to infect people.
Another reminder that the health of humans, animals, and the environment is intertwined. In Brookfield, Illinois, I'm Usher Qureshi reporting.
Today marks the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. Celebration recognizes the culture, history, contributions, and accomplishments of Hispanic Americans. For the next 4 weeks, we will be sharing the stories focused on our Hispanic communities. Gina Arevalo tells us how a movement among Hispanic parents is pushing back against cultural norms.
Hi. Love, respect, family. 3 values that run deep across generations in Hispanic culture. There is a 4th piece to that culture, some might say also runs deep, something known as a flip-flop. For many Hispanics, the flip-flop, or la chancla as it's known in Spanish, is a symbol of discipline, a shoe used to maintain structure and order in the family. Act right or get la chancla.
They didn't do it often, but the threat of physical harm to my body was there at times if I didn't act within, the way that they expected.
For Mom Danelia Arechiga, she says la chancla is a symbol of oppression.
I love my parents, but there's a lot of times that I felt fearful of them because I just wasn't sure how they would react or what they would do.
Though it's often seen as a source of humor, Arechiga is doing her part to end chancla culture for good.
At the end of the day, that's essentially what we're teaching them through our actions is like people that love you can hurt you.
Now she's part of a movement to change the way Hispanic families raise their children. And the first step is ending chancla culture.
That's actually good practice.
Leslie Priscilla is the woman behind the End Chancla Culture movement. She founded Latinx Parenting, a bilingual organization rooted in children's rights and rethinking parenting in Hispanic culture.
It's not just about how we hit them physically, but it's also how we hit them mentally, by shaming them, by talking down to them.
Priscilla says this kind of physical discipline, no matter the child's race, causes significant harm to a child's emotional development.
Our children grow up thinking that respect equals obedience, when respect is just something that we need to be demonstrating and something that we need to be modeling. But in our culture, it's very hard to get that message across to our elders especially.
She says it's time for a cultural shift, similar to how some parents have eliminated spanking.
The Ending Chancla Culture movement kind of invites us to look deeper at, is this actually our parenting practices, or is this something that we inherited?
Ending the cycle hasn't always been easy.
It takes a lot more energy and time. It takes patience and it takes compassion.
So sweet. But it's an investment Priscilla says will pave the way for a new path in Hispanic culture.
This movement is important because we are literally raising our future ancestors.
And one that's already reaping the benefits.
We are building a connection that I don't think I ever had with my parents.
In Los Angeles, I'm Gina Arevalo.
Gina, thank you. Now, another advancement for getting more women of color into political office is Boston will have a mayor who is a woman of color for the first time. Mayor's office has been held by a white man for the past 200 years. November's race is between a woman whose parents immigrated to the U.S. from Taiwan and a woman who describes herself as a first-generation Arab Polish American. Last in our lineup today, small businesses are already getting warnings from their suppliers about Christmas when they say you need to start your holiday purchases to make sure you do get what you want. Supply chain hiccups and a shortage of materials are setting back retailers across the entire country. Jesse Cohen found that includes local businesses.
Back of Beyond Books, this is Sam.
When you step inside Back of Beyond Bookstore,
We'll see about this.
Okay.
you immediately notice just how homegrown it really is. Catered to locals and visitors in Moab, Utah, you'll find books about life outside at every corner.
It's always been an environmental-leaning, fairly liberal store.
But beyond this 1990s storefront is a quiet struggle to keep the shelves full. A struggle that customers will begin to notice as the holidays approach.
It's becoming increasingly dire, and Ingram has just put out a white paper warning all of us that get ready. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Ingram Content Group is an American service provider for the book publishing industry.
Here's the famous clan of the cave bear. We always need to stock that.
Andy Nettle, the owner of Back of Beyond Books, says most independent bookstores like his use Ingram.
And that's in part what's coming this fall and winter is Ingram Books can't find staff. They can't get our books to us in a timely fashion. They're simply saying, we are not going to be able to supply the books you need, period.
And because of this, the time to buy your gifts for the holidays is now. Cindy Rayton, the president of sales at Bookazine, says the supply chain problem is severe.
The majority of the printing for color books is done outside the U.S. And in a lot of countries, whenever there's a COVID outbreak, things have to be shut down.
These issues may have a bigger effect on Back of Beyond Bookstore than Andy would like, but after 2 years, he says his business can handle this.
It's worrisome, and I hate not being able to put a book in a customer's hand, but I think we'll be okay.
Thanks. I'm Jesse Cohen reporting.
Jesse, thank you. New research into the time children spend in front of their screens is helping to shed more light on the pros and cons. Tomorrow, what screen time appears not to do to kids.
Jimmy Kimmel's up next. Good Morning Texas is on the air tomorrow starting at 5 a.m. Thanks for joining us.